guys, and welcome to another episode of The Flying Olive. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the perfect and traditional Easter treat here in the UK, hot cross buns. So there's this myth that they're really difficult to do and they take 6 weeks to make, but they don't. They take the best part of 4 hours, which is quite a long time, but most of that you're just leaving it in a bowl and letting it prove. So today I'm going to show you a quick, easy way to make the perfect hot cross buns so you can have them just in time for Easter, for your parties and your get-togethers, and just for general snackage. There's going to be a lot of different measurements and bits and bobs, and there's a ton of ingredients, but most of them are pretty cheap. For a full list of measurements and ingredients, either go to theflyingolive.co.uk or just look in the description down below and it'll give you a list. Okay, so the first step is you want to bring 300 millilitres of whole milk or full fat milk to the boil, kind of gently. To make sure that you don't sort of overboil it, just keep sort of stirring it, and as soon as it starts boiling, take it off the heat. Once you've done that, you're going to add 50 grams of butter. Okay, so whilst your milk and butter are melting together, what you really want is for it to be warm, like warm enough to touch and stick your fingers in, but not cold, so not room temperature. But you need it to cool down a lot from boiling temperature. So whilst it's doing that, add flour, sugar, salt and 7 grams of yeast, preferably easy bake yeast, because otherwise you have to activate it with water first, when really you want it to just be as a powder in here and it'll all mix together in a moment, because essentially what you're making is bread. So whilst that's cooling down, I've sifted all of these ingredients into here and pre-whisk 1 egg because we're going to add it in a second. So I've made a little well and I'm just going to pour the milk and butter into the middle. Oh, and you just want to slowly sort of stir it in. When it starts to all stick together like that, you can add 1 egg. Okay, so once you've kind of got sticky-ish dough like that, and it just sticks kind of to your fingers, you're ready to knead it. So well flour a board, and I mean well flour it, because now we're going to knead the dough. One point that I didn't mention that is actually quite important is that there's a massive difference between a sticky dough and a loose dough. A sticky dough is like this. Still forms a decent ball like that, but it still sticks to your fingers like this. A loose dough is when it won't form together at all. So if you ever read a sort of baking article or recipe or anything like that, then that's the difference between a dough that's not going to bake very well and a dough that's going to be sticky. So here, to knead, see, ripping it apart, a good way to sort of do it, instead of just mushing it together with your hands, is if you hold one half and then push the other half away from you with the heel of your hand, like that, and then fold it back in on itself. Hold that and push out, and just sort of reform it as you're going along. Okay, so I'd say this dough is about ready now. When you know it's elastic, so if you pull it apart a little bit like that, and it sort of shrinks back into shape, or it sort of wiggles a little bit. If you pull it apart, you're also kind of looking for this texture here where it pulls apart and you can see all the grains, and that's when you know it's about ready to prove. So you leave it like this. You want it in a nice, large, slightly oiled bowl with cling film over the top, not wrapping it, but just over the top of the bowl, that has a little bit of oil on the underside of the cling film. That's purely because you don't want this to form a crust, and the oil will stop that from happening. So you want to prove it for about an hour or until it's sort of doubled in size, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so once your dough has doubled in size or just sort of gone massive and it's springy sort of to the touch, whilst it's still in the bowl, add the apple, orange peel, sultanas and mixed peel. And in the bowl, start kneading it together. So once it's sort of stuck together, you can knead it properly again. Okay, so once it's sort of evenly distributed with the sultanas and various bits of fruit and peel, pop it back in the bowl. Remember to oil it and oil the cling film and all of that, and let it prove again for another hour. Okay, so this has been proving for about an hour now, just over, and it's essentially gone absolutely massive, considering the tiny little ball of dough we had to begin with. So it's kind of jiggly and sticky and all that. Okay, so we're going to portion it out into about 15 pieces. So that works out at roughly 75 grams a piece. I think the best way to go about it is to just peel it away. And then onto a lightly floured board, you want to just kind of roll these into perfect little buns. So pop them onto a tray of baking paper and make sure you leave enough room between each one for them to expand. So when your buns are all ready, cover them again with the oiled cling film and leave them to prove for another hour or until they've roughly doubled in size. Okay, so the traditional cross on top of hot cross buns is essentially just made of flour and a little bit of water. So I've got like a heaped tablespoon of plain flour in here, and I'm just gonna add water drop by drop until I get a thick sort of paste. Okay, so once you've got all your mixture into a piping bag and your buns have been left to prove for an hour, you can start piping the crosses onto the top. Okay, so these have risen for 3 hours, taken ages to make. They've got the crosses on now, and I'm going to pop them in the oven at 200 to 220 degrees on fan, or that's the gas mark 7. for about 20 minutes, or until they've kind of puffed up and they've gone golden brown. Okay, so here I've got some melted or warmed through apricot jam, and I've sieved it so it's got no bits in it. And this is our glaze. So now that they've come out of the oven, onto the warm buns. Just cover the top of them with the apricot jam. Okay, so after 3 hours proving and about an hour of prep and cooking and all this, the final product is right here. They look amazing, and I can tell you they really do smell amazing. So you've got the traditional cross and all of the sultanas and bits of fruit, and I can't wait to eat them. So, I mean, the myth about them being really difficult to make is a myth. They are dead simple, they just take a bit of time. So when Easter finally comes around, if you want to make some on the day, just save yourself a bit of time. The time is in the proving and you don't need to do anything during that time, so as long as you make them early enough, then they're absolutely perfect. Thank you for commenting and subscribing, and I'll see you soon.